In live theater productions, one element that can really help sell a scene is having a projected background. So if your cast is going to a castle or a forest or a classroom or something like that, having that environment projected behind them can really add to that sense of atmosphere and help teleport the audience wherever you're trying to take them. Now, recently, I got to help out with a local production of The Wizard of Oz, a timeless classic, but the director had certain ideas in mind of what he wanted this scene to look like, all these different scenes to look like, kind of a steampunk aesthetic for the Emerald City and, interesting gothic feeling for the witch's castle. And so I helped create these projections that we showed up for all of these different scenes, and I animated them using After Effects and composited them using Photoshop and Firefly. And so I thought it was helpful for anyone out there who is trying to do something similar, walking through some of the steps that I've taken to make these things. So we're gonna walk through some simple scenes and some simple ideas of how I keyframe things and composite different elements and have like a moving sky or grass blowing in the wind or that sort of stuff. Moving, light beams that show up through a jungle scene, and then move into transitions, like transitioning from the Emerald City gates opening into the actual city itself, or a sky writing thing that the witch does as she flies across the stage. And then finally, I'll end showing how we did the live Wizard of Oz mask, which was using Adobe Character Animator to have a talking kind of wizard robotic character on scene projected onto a foam core sculpture on the stage. So this is very different from previous tutorials that I've done, but hopefully it hits on a lot of interesting things and it's something that you can use in your own theater productions. So let's start with a relatively simple scene. Here we are in Kansas, where Dorothy starts the story and ends the story, and we've got some barns, we got a fence, we got some grass, we got some clouds, a windmill in the background, all this stuff. And if this was just static background, this would set the scene pretty well, right? We understand where we are in this environment. But when I play it back, you'll see I've got a few different elements moving. So we've got some wind blowing in the grass here in the foreground. We've got the windmill moving here in the background as well. And we have the clouds slowly moving in the sky. So all of this just gives a little bit of additional motion to the whole scene and makes everything feel a little bit more alive. And later on, actually in the beginning of the play, we started with like a sepia tone over top of the whole thing. And so we just did the, basically the whole thing, but with this. And then at the end, it comes back and it comes in full color. To generate a lot of my elements, I'm going to go to text to image on firefly.adobe.com. This is going to allow me to really quickly iterate and come up with a bunch of these different elements to composite together in Photoshop and After Effects. So, for example, a grassy Kansas field with barns and a clear blue sky, you get something like this. And this is great because this gives me an initial kind of background plate that I can use. And then I can layer the blowing grass, the windmill, the clouds over top of it. I can remove this background. This would work really well. And then I can continue making elements like I want a windmill. Okay, so I can type in, a wooden windmill on a flat green screen background and get something, like this. Now later in Photoshop, I can isolate this out and, cut out the fan as its own thing, remove the green screen background, and then layer that on top of this. So anytime I kind of start with this basic background plate that I'm looking for, and then I'll add additional elements. I need a torch, I need a windmill, I need an extra rock here or something like that, and do these different elements, particularly if you want things to be able to move. So for example, I know I do want this windmill to move. Later on, it's going to get blown away actually by the tornado. So having little elements like that and the more kind of different pieces, that bespoke pieces you have, will just make animating things later a little bit easier. So once I brought my image into Photoshop, really easy to get started with removing the background. So I would just go to select sky. Typically that's going to be able to find it. If it doesn't get it, you can just use the magic wand tool over here with shift to select more of it. And then I'll just press delete and there we go. Now I've got my basic background plate. And so I tried to composite and layer most of these elements together that I knew were the non-video elements, like the sky and the grass in the front. So here we've got the landscape, and then we've got this mill, this tower, and then the fan as a separate element. So with this is a PSD file that now I can save and bring into After Effects, and it's going to remember all of my layers and allow me to manipulate them all as needed. All right, so bringing everything in After Effects, some of this stuff is incredibly easy to animate, like the windmill rotating. Very simple. I just go to my fan here. I click the R key to bring up my rotation, and I would set a keyframe by clicking over here at 0 to have it start that way, bring it all the way to the end, however long the scene is. I think the scene actually is 20 minutes long at the beginning. I left a little bit of extra room just to make sure we had enough space for longer scenes or things like that. And then I changed the rotation to like 12x or something like that. And so slowly over time now, this fan is going to move and rotate 12 times all over, and you just kind of play it by ear, and you say, if that's too fast, I'm going to change that final keyframe to slow, edit it to make it exactly what you want. Now, the real interesting part are the video elements, right? So the clouds moving in the background, this grass blowing in the foreground. How do we go about doing that? Well, the clouds are incredibly easy because all that is a background video layer of clouds. I kind of stretched it, squashed it a little bit to help it fit a little bit and give it a little bit more perspective. But all that is a long, video that I found online to, have these clouds move. Now, if you're looking for particular places for video, you have a few options. So YouTube, of course, is a great repository for stuff. If I'm searching, for example, dust effects that I can add in, I could search for green screen dust, and I'm going to find all sorts of different effects that I have here. Use a system like Cobalt.tools to download the YouTube video, and you can integrate those into your project. Stock.adobe.com is going to be another fantastic resource for this sort of stuff. All sorts of things that you're looking for with green screen, black, what background, whatever kind of matte stuff that you can add. This is going to be a great resource as well. And then finally, of course, Adobe Firefly, text to video. You can type in a specific prompt and download those. And they've got some new tools since the last tutorial I made where you can actually start with a beginning and ending frame, which is really cool for some transitional stuff that you could do there. So you can shop around and see what works best for you and your scene. Let's talk about the grass in the foreground here. What's actually happening is this is a mask that I drew over top of a bigger piece of video. I just found this long footage of grass blowing in the wind, and basically just brought that in, used the pen tool here to draw a mask around it, and then I really upped the feathering to 108 pixels, and that helps blend it in a lot. If this was 0 pixels instead, it's going to be a little bit easier to tell where that transition is, right? That looks really, really bad. You can very clearly tell. But when you change that to something like 115, 108, something like that, it's going to blend in a lot more. Now you can color correct this, make it look a little nicer to blend in with the kind of the yellowish tone that we've got here. So you can play around with that, but adding an element like this. So I think about this like, grass blowing in the wind, maybe some dust particles flying over top of everything every once in a while. Things like that to just always have some motion happening in the background. And it shouldn't be overwhelming, right? We want the actors and the scenes on the stage to be the main focus, but this should kind of complement that. And so all the motion, I feel like in most of these scenes is very slow, very deliberate, not over the top. The grass is not blowing like crazy, except for the hurricane, the twister scene, or like that right there. But every once in a while, something like that is okay, just to add a little bit of additional life to the scene. And particularly, when this is the sepia tone, it's a lot more subdued and it's a lot more kind of scaled back, and that works as well. So I really like this scene. This is the jungle scene where we meet the cowardly lion. And there's a lot of different motion going on here, very slow and subtle, again, as usual. So we have these palm fronds that are kind of slowly blowing in the wind and moving. There's these dust particles that are kind of showing up and glowing and kind of have a greenish yellow tint to them. This vine very subtly moves back and forth and slides around. There's actually a sun and some light rays that are going to appear here very subtly every once in a while. And we've got some eyes that appear over here and down here in the shadows just to give it some additional mystery and depth. So a really easy way to add motion to static effects is using the puppet pin tool. So I've got my palm trees here. Let's just bring in this palm branch element. I'm just going to press S to scale it down, drag this, R, rotate, and let's just imagine I wanted another, palm frond over here on the side blowing. I don't think I would want this, but just say we did. So there's a few things that I want to do here. Number one, where do I want this to rotate from? And that's going to be the origin handle right here. So what I'm going to do that is click on this little pan behind anchor point tool and just click and drag this to where I want it to rotate. In this case, I want it to appear right here, and then I would probably move this off screen. And so now all rotations, if I press R and drag this, all rotations are going to happen from that as opposed to the center of the image. And so that works pretty well. And I could just, keyframe some rotation. So I could do something like, rotate, and then it moves, down here, maybe a little bit, and then over here, up. And that's fine too. I think I did that for these other palm fronds. But an even nicer way to do it is using this, what we call the puppet pin tool. I've shown this in some past Character Animator tutorials before, but this is a really nice one that you just click this little thumbtack tool up here, and then I'm going to click here and add a little dot, and here's another one, and something like that. And now what you can do is actually you can kind of bend and warp this image to whatever you want. And so this feels a little bit more natural to me, where I can have a little bit more sway, and I can add as many different pin points as I want. So if I want this part, to kind of go up and breathe a little bit, and then I keyframe those by going into my mesh and deform and all the puppet pins, and let's press U to see all three of these at the same time. And so now I have these puppet pins here, and then let's say, okay, now 15 seconds in, now I want everything to kind of move down slightly like this. And it's gonna go and do kind of the in-between of those two. And then I want it to go back up, so maybe we do, something like this, and maybe I'm keeping one anchored here, and then the rest kind of moving around. And so over time, that's going to give it some really nice, more lively motion, and it's going to look like the palm frond is not just a flat image rotating up and down. It's going to bend and sway a little bit. I did the exact same thing with the vine back here. I do the same thing with in other scenes with different branches of trees moving up and down. This is a really, really common technique I use. And then, because this is a longer scene, I'm not just gonna, do this over and over again. I'll make like a minute or two of this, and I'll just select the keyframes and copy paste, throughout the whole scene. So with something like these yellow dust particles, these Firefly effects that are happening, basically I found, this Firefly or generated, I don't remember this Firefly thing of these yellow things moving around in the sky slowly. And then I brought that in to the actual composition. I changed the blend mode by switching toggles and modes over here to screen, or an add is going to get rid of that black background if you have that. And then I think I added a little bit of a blur to them and some hue saturation controls to just make things look a little nicer. You can just select anything, go to effect. There are so many different effects that you can add and play around with. But in this case, I added hue and saturation and the fast box blur, and just added a 3 blur radius to that. But you'll notice I kind of have this staircase effect going on here because we this was only 45 seconds long, and I had to extend it. And so what I did was just have the opacity of one blend into the other. So here I have one fading out and then another fading in. And so during that process, you see, one kind of goes out and the other comes in, and that's just a way to extend it. So I just do this, duplicate, copy, paste over and over again to extend throughout the full scene. Finally, for this scene, if you play this back, you don't really notice, but there are some light rays that are coming through the branches and everything. And you don't really see this unless you kind of skim through it like this. You see that light, and there's light rays that are kind of showing up over time. That is a really cool and easy effect that you can add to any kind of outdoor environment to really add some nice depth to everything. So what I did was I created a new adjustment layer down here. So you just go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, and then added to that adjustment layer, I added an effect. So I went over to my effects and I searched for light rays. and there's this thing called CC light rays, and I dragged that onto my adjustment layer, and then you get basically this sun that you can move around. And so I've got here, if I click on center and click this little icon here, you see I get where the center is, and I can kind of drag and move this around, and you see it's actually reacting to the artwork itself. So like when it goes behind this tree, it's kind of, blocking out that part, whereas it's going full blast over here in this open area. So the default settings work pretty well. You can of course adjust the intensity and the radius and all that stuff if you want to, but all you have to do to add a nice effect is just start here. And then we can just keyframe this and say, okay, I want my center to be, it looks like I moved it here, but I want my center to start here, and then we move it over here towards the end of the whole thing. And then you see I have it end up in the keyframe over here where it's on the other side. And so slowly over time, over the 8 minutes that this scene goes, the sun goes from one side to the other, and these light rays show up. Just a nice way to add some additional light and texture to your scenes. So with all these basic building blocks, you can start to create maybe some more complicated scenes as well. So here is the twister scene where we have I've swapped in a different storm background that I found for the clear background. The twister was a twister on a green screen stock footage that I found, and I'm just having that keyframe in and starts in this corner and then slowly goes to the right-hand side of the screen. I'm overlaying some debris green screen effects that I found on Adobe Stock. You'll see here when it gets close to the windmill, this is actually going to come apart and get blown away. And those are just position and rotation keyframes, nothing too crazy. The parts of the fence, these were just some extra planks that I added to the fence that kind of fly out to add to that effect. I had an overlay above the barn as well that I'm adding in, and that blows away. I'm overlaying a wind effect, a different type of debris. I'm speeding up the grass. So you see, like, all of these different elements are just kind of coming together. I'm just layering and going nuts with all this stuff, right? I'm just going, like, adding more and more until it feels like too much, and kind of scaling it back from there. But the idea is just to feel this sense of chaos in this scene and just everything's kind of falling apart. And I just wanted that to really come across in this. So, really just adding these different elements and thinking about your scene and what can you layer on over top of it. So here, I know I wanted like this sense of wind. So I found this like wind, a gusting effect, and it had everything blowing left to right to feel like everything's moving in the same direction. The debris, I think there's 2 or 3 different types of debris stock footage that I found that I'm layering over top. I think I made my own debris too. There's some elements like some of these leaves and stuff like that I just have a move keyframe left to right just to add more to it. Just continually layering and trying things out and seeing what feels good. Then we get to the portal where we're basically being transported to the world of Oz. This is just same as the windmill. It's this rotation effect that I'm doing. I'm just rotating this static image of a portal that I generated and have it move around and put all the debris over top. This is the same puppet pin tool stuff that I'm doing that I showed with the palm fronds in the jungle scene. So I found this chicken and I just used the pin tool to have the the wings just move up and down. And then later on we get into a cow that comes across the screen as well. A pig is there. Where's the cow? Somewhere here. There's the cow. And then we also have a barn that comes in. This was a 2-piece thing that I have come in, and then at a certain point it breaks and falls apart. We have some stock footage that I found of someone riding a bike. I silhouetted it, and this is when Ms. Gulch, who's basically the Wicked Witch of the West, flies across. She's screaming in the background, yelling in the background, all this stuff. And then I slowly faded in a rainbow color over top of everything, and I added some rainbow light leaks footage that I found and generated to add some rainbow type effects and make it change from the much more subdued sepia tones to the full color environment that we have. And then eventually this zooms in. I have a night sky and just a rainbow that is glowing and showing up. Another fun thing you can think about is transitions between scenes. So for example, when we start off in the Land of Oz, everyone's outside of the gate and there are these, turning gears, and we kind of have this nice steampunk emerald gold style that we're going for here. And these are, again, simple, just rotation keyframes, very easy. But then how do we transition into the land of Oz? How does that work? And so what we decided to do was use some generative video using Firefly generate video. There's a whole tutorial on that that I've done before that you can check out. But basically, we have the gates open. We see the Emerald City here. We go down. We're now racing through the streets of the Emerald City, going into kind of this. We had some dust effects, and then we're going into kind of this Grand Central Station town square where we've got some dust that's appearing here. We've got some light rays that are happening up here, and we've got some gears that are turning to add a little bit of additional motion. I think sometimes there's also some shine that happens here, some sparkles. Yeah, like that. Perfect. That appear as well to make things look a little brighter and nicer. So behind the scenes, all that's happening is we are opening here, and then here is this static image that I'm slowly zooming in, and then we slowly zoom down. You see I've got a blur and a mask and kind of just transitioning into this other video that I've sped up from Firefly, and then I'm just kind of stitching multiple videos together. I add this dust effect to kind of help hide a bit of the transitions. It's not perfect, it's a little rocky, but still get that. And then we end up in this final scene, and then I add in these gears. Now everything's happening so fast you don't really notice the gears coming in, but if you look really closely, you'll be able to see they're kind of floating into place there. I could have done a better job of that, but you get, the basic idea. Now a little bit later on, there's this scene where the witch flies by and it says "Surrender, Dorothy" in skywriting, basically in clouds. And we were thinking, well, how do we do that? How do we go about doing that sort of thing? And so what we ended up doing was where I pulled up, here we've got kind of a sky, and then I have these letters appear. Each of them were kind of individually animated, so they flow up and down. And then I found this cloud burst effect that I'm adding. And then I kind of just blur and lower the opacity over time to make it look like it's fading away. And then once everything's faded away, we go back down into the scene as well. So that's kind of a small cutaway that happens because we're running into this, particular scene of the witch flying back and forth. And so all I did was take this. I, in Photoshop, did extend, the image. So I got a roof, an emerald roof, and then a sky over top of it. And then I individually added the letters in and the cloud poofs and all of that stuff to make it look interesting. Here we've got the witch's castle. We have a few things going on here. We got some dust at the bottom. We got some flames showing up at the top here. We got some candles that are glowing. The candles are really easy. Like, this is just some light things that I drew over top of the candles, and then I turned them into an add blend mode and just had them kind of change their opacity over time. And over time, it makes it look like they are flashing. I did the same thing with this background here, where I also have the CC light rays, sun kind of going across to add some light streaks as well. So yeah, overall, this sets up a really nice, mysterious scene for the castle. Now there's also a part where you're in the castle and Dorothy is calling for Auntie M, and kind of this specter of her shows up in the background where we got this mystical aura green screen that we added it, and then this silhouette of this person looking around. And Auntie M is off stage saying, Dorothy, whatever. And then we got the witch who comes up and takes over as well. And this was really easy to set up, right? So all I did was find this green screen footage here of this person doing this thing. This was from Adobe stock, if I remember correctly. And then I just brought it into the actual thing. And then we added the effect where I just brought the lightness all the way down here, so it's completely dark. And then I think I added a mask and the feather showing up down here at the bottom. So it kind of looks like she fades in. So using stock green screen type elements to, kind of composite things together can be a nice way to do things as well. Adding green screen elements into your scenes is incredibly easy in After Effects. So for example, I've got a few different green screen things happening here, including these bugs that are kind of crawling. It's pretty subtle, but if you look really closely, you see kind of these bugs crawling along the floor down here, and it just adds to the creepiness and adds a little bit of additional motion to everything. So if I double click on this, I'll see this is what it looks like. I've got all my bugs kind of crawling around, and I changed it with some color, curves over here and green screen. But let's just get rid of both of these. And let's say I just brought this in and brought it down here and wanted to composite it. So all I would have to do is go to Effects, Key Light. That brings this. I click the eyedropper next to Screen Color, click the green screen part, And there you go. Now I've got my bugs and they're all moving around. And you'll see that I added, with my mask here, I added a bit of some feathering to it to make it feel a little bit more like they're fading in from the edges. Now, this color isn't working great, so I'm going to go to Effects and let's go to Color Correction, and Hue and Saturation should be enough. Let's bring the lightness down to all the way to the bottom, and that's going to just make them dark and kind of blend in. And of course I could change it if I wanted them. If it was more, I need them to be more green or something like that, I could change the hue and saturation instead to have them fit the scene. A lot of times with all these elements, I will add like hue and saturation and adjust this slightly so everything feels like it fits in the scene together. If you're not pre-compositing this stuff in Photoshop and doing some of your, color treatments there. But little things like that, really easy to add these green screen elements and layer it. I think I did the same with the clouds in the background and some dust particles and things like that. There's these faces that are fading into the trees in the background as well to add to the creepiness. Just kind of a fun scene to put together. Finally, we have the great and powerful Oz wizard mask. This was our most ambitious thing, but also the most fun to put together. So my friend James made a foam core statue, sculpture basically of this wizard head. I used that as a reference image in Adobe Firefly to create a basic head structure, and then I cut out the pieces and made a character animator puppet based off of that. And so we've got this wizard head that I have the jaw moving, I have the pupils moving, I have blinks working, and then there's a few triggers. If I press 2, I had these eyebrows that come down when he's really angry, and then 3 has him actually keep his eyes closed. So in one part he's laughing and he's like, ha 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 ha. You could do something like that, or when he's angry, you need to go, or whatever. You've got a few emotional range options there. Now I'm kind of moving around all over the place, but in the actual show, we turned off the head position and tilt strength and just had this projection mapped onto the sculpture and got the sizing just right. And that way it was kind of static in one place, looking down at the characters. Just behind the scenes to show the basic rigging of this is just a big head. And the main thing that we have going on here is this jaw that's moving up and down. So I've got a stick tagged as jaw, and then we've got these different elements just to keep it static here. And then in the actual play, what we did was we turned audio input off and we only made it camera input. That way, if the wizard, if someone else is talking, Dorothy or someone else is talking off stage, notice the jaw isn't moving. But if the wizard is actually talking and moving his jaw up and down, that will move it. And so that's an easy way to kind of cancel out the other characters. You do have the option up here, remember in your settings under lip sync, you can change camera-based muting and make that strong. And that's another option that you have as well that you could play around with in kind of this live setting. So you've got stuff like this. You can think of also like the magic mirror in Shrek or other types of digital characters that you might want to bring into your production. And I'm not going to get into the full rigging details of Character Animator. There are obviously hundreds of tutorials I made about that you can check out on this channel. So it wasn't perfect. We hooked it up through NDI, which is going to add a little bit of a lag and delay. And we honestly didn't have the time to troubleshoot all of that stuff. And so it felt a little framey. It felt a little behind the scenes. Honestly, if we did it again, I might just pre-record everything and have enough space in between for Dorothy and friends to react to it. But overall, just a really fun way to add a cool digital character and into part of the cast and make it larger than life. When this thing is projected, onto the background, it's kind of a really cool effect that really helped sell this scene. So I hope this was a helpful look at how I put things together for this show, but hopefully you can take the same principles and ideas that I talked about here and apply it to whatever production you're working on. We hope to continue this for future shows, and we have all sorts of ideas of how to keep pushing it and making more stuff. So maybe I'll do some follow-up tutorials in the future if people are interested. But thank you so much for watching, and break a leg.